but like, that's just life in the Big Ten this year. It's just hard. Like every single game is hard. I mean, like Washington, and then so you play Oregon, and then your next game is at Washington, and like Washington is the worst team in the league as far as record, but they've been in a lot of games.
Welcome back into Nebraska Shoot Around. Anna and Mike joining you now, talking Nebraska men's and women's hoops. Mike, let's get the men out of the way first. We gotta talk this. Reaction to their loss at Wisconsin wasn't necessarily the most competitive game, but what did you see out of that?
Yeah, I mean, you get down 19-2, and it's more of the same, right? Like just slow start, especially on the road. Give up a bunch of 3-pointers, especially on the road. Knowing that Wisconsin is a team that shoots a lot of threes. I think 10.8 3-pointers made against Nebraska, Wisconsin has in the last like 4 or 5 games. It's one of those things where like you knew what they wanted to do and they just weren't, I don't know if they weren't ready or something, and then change starting lineups and hopefully that helps, and then it kind of didn't, and it's just kind of a mess right now. Like they need a win in the worst way, and when Wisconsin shot, I believe it was over 40% from three. That's just tremendous. It's 45.9% from three. They made 17 of 37, and John Tanji made 3 threes in the first like 5 minutes. So out of the gate real slow, and yeah, and then fought back. They came back, fought back and cut the lead to 3 at one point. I think it was 24-21. And then Wisconsin went on a little bit of a run to end the half. And then the second half started kind of the same way-ish that the first half started, just kind of slow. And yeah, pretty bad recipe for a loss. I guess it's almost a 30-point loss on the road. And Nebraska didn't lead one time in the game, not even for 1 second. So wasn't great.
If you're Fred Hoiberg, do you continue to try to switch up that starting lineup, or do you go back to what you'd previously been using?
Yeah, he said in the past that it doesn't matter who starts, it matters who finishes the game. So maybe you try something. I mean, one of the things, and maybe it was a matchup thing, but like Braxton Mia has started virtually the entire year, and he didn't play 1 minute in the game. Is he hurt? Is there something else going on? Like what are the reasons? What was it? Just the matchup? You didn't like the matchup. So be curious to find that out. I obviously wasn't in Madison to ask those questions, but that one's a little curious. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the starting lineup. So like starting lineup gets them out of a hole, and then they kind of come back in, and then it was primarily, I thought, Raleigh Wooster who played pretty well. Of all the players, I think he played the best. And his plus minus was the only one positive of all the people that saw significant minutes, meaning 20 plus minutes in the game. It was +3. So that tells you how bad that was. But I don't know. I mean, so they get 11 straight stops, Nebraska does, which is that's awesome. But you dug this big hole, and so you couldn't come out. So I don't know. And then the starters come back in and they help get those stops. And so it's a difficult decision. Like what do you do? I think Connor Season prefers maybe coming off the bench. I like the offense he can provide at times off the bench. I don't know if you go back to Raleigh and Bryce and Bearkay and Jawan and Andrew Morgan maybe is the lineup that you go with, and you just kind of roll with that, or do you just go with that small lineup? What the small lineup was what was referred to at the beginning of the year, with Bearkay at the 5, Jawan at the 4, Bryce at the 3, and then Sam, I guess, in there and have Bryce at the point guard and have Sam. And I don't know. There's so many different things, and there's so many things that ail this team right now in this losing streak that I don't think there's one silver bullet. But I also am not sure what the answer is as far as lineups are concerned, because it doesn't get any easier going forward.
Yeah, speaking of that, you bring in Illinois on Thursday at home. What do you need to see from this Nebraska team to try to squeak one out and go back on the right track for the Huskers?
Yeah, Illinois is one of the best teams in the league and a top 15 team in the country when they're fully healthy. Their best player, I guess, was out with mono last week. So, like, is he going to be able to play, be available? Don't know. Obviously, Pinnacle Bank Arena has been good to Nebraska in the last 2 years overall, not quite the last two games. So, but Illinois is very good, and they're very scary. You got to maybe hopes for some, I don't know, if it's PBA magic or something to happen to kind of get them over the hump. 7:30 game, so it's not late, it's not early, it's kind of right in the mix. For them to win that game, I think they're going to have a strong performance from Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams, who are their two best players. So those guys got to play better than they did on Sunday against Wisconsin, that's for sure.
And then you go back on the road, again, your Pacific road trip, and you start with Oregon. And it doesn't get much easier from there, Mike.
No, yeah. So you have Illinois, and then you go to Oregon, and that's, you're talking Thursday, Saturday, so you leave, or Thursday, Sunday. So you have one day off after your game on Thursday, probably on Friday, and then you practice Saturday in the morning, and then you leave for Oregon probably in Saturday afternoon, and then it is a 6:30 game, so you have a little more of a break or acclimation time. But that's just life in the Big Ten this year. It's just hard. Every single game is hard. I mean, Washington, and then so you play Oregon, and then your next game is at Washington, and Washington is the worst team in the league as far as record, but they've been in a lot of games. They really have. They have a talented, great Osbar is a very talented player and tough to stop. And Washington's played well at home, so that one's not a layup by any means. So I don't know if you can. At best, probably right now you're looking at can we get one of these next three? And if you go 2 and 3, then that's super positive. But you got to try and get one of these next three. I don't know which one that is, but somehow, some way, you get one. Look, the Big Ten is like I said, it's really hard. And you look at teams like Minnesota, who was basically left for dead in the first part of the league play. And then now they've had some upset wins, frankly, and they've won a couple games here in the last couple weeks when they weren't expected to. So anything can happen on any given night in the Big Ten. It took, Penn State was up big at Michigan, and Michigan needed an 11-0 run to end the game to win the game. And so there's no layup at all. And it's kind of life in the Big Ten this year. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, and I mean, that brings me to the Big Ten tournament picture. So they only take the top 15 teams of 18, and Nebraska is kind of vying for a spot there too. I mean, we were talking about March Madness and what seed line. Well, now we're talking about, okay, this Nebraska team just needs to take care of business and get in that Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, imagine that, right? So 2.5, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, when they played UCLA, you're talking about when they beat UCLA, which was January 4th, and it's January 28th. They beat UCLA, and it's what seed line can they get to in the NCAA tournament? And now it's can they get to the Big Ten tournament? So, I mean, they are one game back of Penn State for 16th place. Right now, Nebraska is 2-7, and Washington is 1-8. That's the 18th and 17th team. 3 wins is Northwestern, Minnesota, Rutgers, and Penn State all have 3 wins, and they're above you right now. They play all of them coming up outside of Rutgers, obviously. They already played them. So, and they play Iowa again, who has 4 wins. It's a jumbled mess in that middle. And, Michigan State's kind of stretching it a little bit. So, I don't know. Right now, you're just fighting like, can we make the Big Ten tournament? That's got to be kind of the motto, which is crazy because in December, after winning the Diamond Head Classic, it was like, all right, like the talk was we came back, or this team's built to win an NCAA tournament game. They're right now feels like they're pretty far away from that. Even though like their net rankings and all this stuff, like I'm throwing kind of all that, the analytical metrics out the window. It's just what I see. And right now it's not very good.
All right, well, let's flip over to the women's side of things. A team that is just off a close loss against Ohio State at home, breaking that 15-game win streak. An incredible win streak, by the way, at home for the women, too. Led the Big Ten. Ends at the hands of number 12, Ohio State. So obviously not a bad loss, a game that on paper Ohio State should win. But it was a 1-point game there in the fourth quarter, and Nebraska did have an opportunity to win it late.
Yeah, it's not a bad loss at all. You look at who they've played, kind of not down the stretch, but you beat Michigan State, which was a big win, I guess, because that was at home that extended that win streak, and then you handled Wisconsin. That wasn't even close. And then like losing to Ohio State's not hard. Big crowd, right? Packed PBA game. Not a bad loss at all. I think the women are very squarely, obviously, gonna make the NCAA tournament. Now you're just kind of like, what seed line can we get? And also in the Big Ten tournament, I mean, right now they're 6-3 and tied for 5th with Maryland and Minnesota. Minnesota's a team that they handled. Minnesota seems to be figuring it out a little bit. So have big opportunities coming up here to kind of get some wins, like Purdue. That one is on the road, but that you feel probably pretty good about that. At Indiana is going to be tough. It's just always is tough to play there, and Indiana's usually pretty good or has been pretty good, but they're at 5-4 in the league, so they've taken a dip back from last year. It's one of those things where they've really adjusted with losing Potts and Widener. We've talked about that, and everyone's kind of talked about that a ton. So they've really kind of adjusted, and players have stepped up in kind of different fashion. It's almost a different person every game, outside of Alexis Markowski, which is just kind of the constant. So it'll be very interesting to see how they can you win these next 2, even though you're going on the road to Indiana, where they've played well there in the past. So, this week, I guess, this next handful of games is maybe critical. You got to go 1-1. You'd think you'd go 1-1, and maybe can catch a 2-0 there.
What's impressed you most about this women's team? Obviously, you see the adversity they've faced, 2 season-ending injuries with Allison Widener, Natalie Potts. The depth took a hit, but not necessarily fully took a hit because of just how Amy Williams had built that team. There's still, 10 players suiting up every single game? Correct me if I'm wrong there. But
they have a total of 10 available players.
Yeah, they're still totally fine in terms of depth and having bodies to come in and out, but obviously you can't replace what Widener and Potts brought. But I mean, this team has stuck together, and I think that's been really impressive so far, and to be that close against the Ohio State team. And Alexis Markowski told me after that game, like, hey, the margin of error in these games against top teams is so small, and we just didn't meet that today, but there's so much positive that we can take away from this matchup. And I think if this Nebraska team faces Ohio State or anybody in it that they previously lost to with UCLA, USC, I think the score is going to be a lot different than the team that played that USC game back a few months ago.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, you're probably not going to see a 30-point loss or whatever it was to those teams if they play again, because I think people have kind of settled in, and it hasn't been, just one person that's really stepped up. Their depth, we talked about it at the beginning of the year and saw it at the beginning of the year in the non-conference. They played everybody all the time, and that has really helped them now when they've had those two injuries. You have Jess Petrie or Birdie Rimdahl or Amaya Hargrove or Kendall Moriarty kind of stepping up in different games. Now, Logan Nisley has been really good too at times. So you have those players kind of stepping up in different games. Now, can you get that to be a little more consistent from where you have a sort of third option? Because right now, Britt Prince is basically the second option, which is fine. And her going 4 of 13 again is probably, I feel like that's not a normal thing for her, not going to normally happen. So she's kind of taken over that role as like the go-to guard person. So really you need just the contributions to be, you need to find another couple double figure scores, right? Like 1 or 2 more a game where you have, 15 to 20 from Alexis, you have roughly 15 from Britt. And then can the other person be Callan Hake or Logan Nisley or Jess Petrie? Can that combination get you another 40, in some cases? So it's been interesting, just seeing how they've done that. And Petra Bojan has really kind of stepped up to learn quickly. Her growth this year has been pretty big time, considering the beginning of the year, it was hey, we're just trying to get her up to speed. And now she's playing a lot more, backing up Alexis and doing a nice job in those minutes. So can she provide you, 6 and 4 rebounds and a couple fouls? Yeah. So you look at that, that's a positive. But I think you need to just get a little more of a consistent third scorer. And because the depth is there, you just don't know who it's going to be. So really, if you kind of can spread that out, get 8 to 12 from the next 4 people, then they'll be in a little bit better situation.
Hey, and how about the 3-point game for the Huskers too? I mean, not every game you're going to shoot 16 threes and make them like they did against Wisconsin, but to have that versatility of, hey, you have to guard this team at the 3-point line, and then you also have to worry about Markowski in the middle. That's a pretty dangerous team.
And she can be a good passer out of the post too if she gets doubled, or she moves quick enough, makes a decision quick enough where she can go up and hit it. But you're right, you're not gonna get 16, but you also can't really go 1 of 7, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those where you've seen both those things happen in the last 2 games. So can you go 5 of 12, or 7 of 15? That would be a great number, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to be right about that 35% mark, and 35% is good as a team shooting from 3. So just kind of even the last 2 games out, and you'll be fine. Give me 6 threes a game, go 6 of 15 even is good. So.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thanks for joining me on Nebraska Shoot Around. Thank you all for watching, and we'll talk to you next time on the show.